Ugh, good God, who is it? Not another one of those Jurassic Park fanboys. Mountbatten residence, Hugo here.
Hugo, what have you done with my Santos?
Santos who? Never heard of him.
My Cartier Santos. Yesterday it was here in its box, and now it's gone. And guess what? You're not here either.
Oh, the Cartier, of course. I borrowed it. You see, I have this fabulous promo event for the park this evening.
The park?
Jurassic Park, darling, with Stephen and the whole gang. Jeff will be there. You know how he likes his tanks. So I thought I'd wear your Santos.
Hugo, bring back my watch immediately, okay?
What's that? I can't hear you, old sport.
Hugo, hello? Hugo, I mean it.
There's a storm, darling. I can't hear you. Mustache, toolpip.
Hugo, I'm not messing around. Bring back my watch. Hello? Hello? Hugo!
Okay, hi guys, and welcome to the show. As a watch enthusiast, it's clear the vintage market has changed irrevocably. It's harder than ever before to find a genuine, all-original Seiko at a bargain price that ticks all the boxes on the used market, especially as Seiko themselves keep raising their own prices at retail. So today I start a series of videos looking at different brands, hopefully over the coming months, and what bargains you can find under $500. Hopefully there'll be many more videos like this, so please give a like if you'd like to see further explorations of this particular price point and subject. So recently I acquired my dream Cartier Santos, the Moonphase, which after a year of hunting, I finally found the right model. But what about a Moonphase not in the thousands, but at a more affordable level? Well, I accepted this challenge, so let's see what I found. Now, before I get into it, I'll do a quick wristwatch check. Yes, I'm wearing the Explorer. I haven't worn this combo for donkey's years. This is my Valor strap I designed for Candy Watch Club, and out of all the collaborations I've done with them, this is by far my favorite. It's the most special. The historic importance of the colors, the name, the meaning behind the design, and also it was the first design I did for them. So yeah, and as you can tell, the colors match, so I'm very happy. Now, before we unveil this little capolavoro, this piccolo meraviglia from Seiko, I want to discuss why, historically, why I've identified this particular sweet spot in the used market, because I picked up this incredible watch for only $250. Let's explore the history, why this is perhaps one of the golden ages of Seiko. Following the Quartz crisis that Seiko had set in motion in 1969, that we all know decimated the previously dominant Swiss watchmakers, by the 1980s, quartz and digital watches were all the rage, even with the well-moneyed yuppies, with both of these forms of timekeeping technology going through something of a renaissance. The leaders and top three innovators were Seiko, Casio, and Citizen. However, the Swiss counterattacked by diversifying into more aspirational luxury, as well as offering their own higher-end quartz alternatives, primarily in order to compete, but more importantly, to survive. As previously documented extensively on this channel, the Rolex Oyster Quartz, Omega Constellation chronometers, Piaget ultra-thin polos, and Concord watches were all prime examples of this. For a few big Swiss names, the strategy of making traditional higher-end watchmaking more desirable started to actually work. A prime example of this is the Audemars Piguet Quantieme Perpetual Automatic, famously worn by perhaps the best example of the type of customer it was aimed at. We are of course talking about the character Frank Cross, played so memorably and wonderfully by Bill Murray in the 1988 movie Scrooged. It was a clever, poignant and hilarious reinterpretation of the classic Dickens Christmas tale.
We have spent $40 million on a live TV show. You guys have got an ad with America's favorite old fart. Now, I have to kill all of you.
Now what makes this a perfect bit of watch casting is, well, two reasons. Firstly, the character of Frank Cross is the ultimate personification of ruthless 80s wealthy yuppie in New York. And then secondly, the watch itself was actually Bill Murray's own watch. Now, typically he wears a Datejust, so did he choose this watch for that role? I'd like to think so. It's still a bit of a mystery, but it certainly wasn't product placement, and it adds an extra level of authenticity to a cinematic watch icon, which few ever achieve.
This was by no means a new watch. Audemars Piguet had introduced this revolutionary watch a decade before in 1978, but by the 80s it still held the title of the world's thinnest automatic perpetual calendar. This was achieved by effectively adapting the renowned caliber 2120, a JLC-based movement launched in 1967 and finally ending production in the early 1990s. So this was really an unplanned purchase from eBay. I've always had my eye out for this watch. Right, drum roll please, here we go. Really curious. I don't know much about this watch in terms of its size. Looks promising. Oh my god, it's very period correct. Look at that. Wow, that's a nice strap actually. Looks nice. I think it's aftermarket, yeah. But we got pushes for all the settings. Let's have a closer look. It's a very kind of faux enamel look, but gorgeous. Blacked out hands, there's beautiful Moonphase there. I like that layered look there with the brush and then the beveling. Really cool. Alright, let's take it back to the studio. So there it is. Ooh, gorgeous. Look at that. Absolute pure class. The Kipper's knickers, what can I say? So how did this watch come about, and where does it fit in terms of the history of Seiko around this time? Let's take a look. During the 1980s, Seiko was pushing quartz technology to the highest limits. In 1983, they introduced the world's first analog quartz chronograph with the 7A28 movement, which went on to become even more famous with over 40 variations, ultimately being worn by James Bond and even a version specially issued to RAF pilots. That year, they experimented with combining analog and digital in a diver before anyone else, and we all know how successful that went, with the H558, aka the Arnie. This was a crazy period where Seiko was literally trying to put anything and everything on your wrist, decades before so-called smartwatches. From the first wrist-top televisions to the first computer, and remember the drum machine Seiko I scored off eBay in a very early video?
Perfect image, Q.
Really, 007. Look, I haven't time for these adolescent antics.
But not just high-tech for land, also for conquering oceans, with some of the first digital depth gauges. And let's not forget, working with the most legendary car designer of all time, Giorgetto Giugiaro, with the Speedmaster range, as discussed over a year ago in a specially dedicated video, and the personal choice of Ayrton Senna himself, no less. These cutting-edge watches for the time permeated into pop culture stardom, like the quirky technology in the memo recorder from the movie Ghostbusters. And there was countless other examples, so please share your favorites in the comments. It seemed there was nothing Seiko could not do. So what about more classical complications?
The 80s was very much an era where people were obsessed with technology. Seiko was undoubtedly at the forefront of this crest of the wave, so to speak. And it was always bold enough to try new things. It had the know-how and the capability, the infrastructure, the mastery of all these different forms of horological technology to do it. Nobody really else had that, from mechanical to solar to LCD to quartz, etc., etc. And combining them, and it was a fascinating time. What happened was there was a kind of pushback. There was more of an increased demand for more traditional watches, and we saw the Moonphase trend really coming back. There was a kind of resurgence. But naturally, Seiko wanted a slice of that pie too. So that's how this particular watch was born.
At 34 millimeters in diameter and only 6.6 millimeters tall, it's almost the exact same scale as my old Audemars Piguet equivalent I used to own. And for those unaware, yes, men did wear watches this small. The ultra-slender proportions are thanks to the super-thin Quartz 7F39 caliber, which makes it supremely cuff-friendly, gracefully comfortable, and uber-light to wear. The tri-compacts arrangement with the 4 subdials is similar to the Quantieme Perpetual, only the quintessential bosom-cut Moonphase is at the 12 and not the 6. Unusually, there are 2 crowns, equidistantly placed at the 3 and 9. However, while a little peculiar, they do give a pleasing sense of balance to the watch that is only broken by the extra little micro pusher for advancing the Moonphase, hidden at the 2 o'clock. But it must be said, setting this complex watch is extremely easy, as well as both crowns being nicely recessed. A bonus of these more subtle crowns is that it can be worn on either left or right wrist effortlessly. The dial does a good job of mimicking the enamel style of classical clock and pocket watches, along with the 1920s style printed italic diminutive numerals that are nicely not cut off by the high polished gold framed subdials. There's a lot of detail here, and I'm only just getting started. The delicate leaf-style hands are all painted to resemble the thermal bluing of hands we see in higher-end watchmaking. The 12 applied gold circular hour markers at the very periphery of the dial add a nice little level of detail and refinement that work well with the alluring symmetry of the dial layout as a whole. The actual Moonphase itself is a vivid high-polished gold, along with accompanying stars, that contrasts exquisitely against the royal blue night sky.
One of the most interesting aspects of this watch is, without a shadow of doubt, the case design. It's very Art Deco in its feel and look, but at the same time, it utilizes the main strength of the 7F39 caliber, aside from its wide variety of complications, and that is how small and compact it is. So the subsequent versions, there was a whole plethora available, were a lot more sporty, bigger, more kind of modern, minimalist, if you will. I think this is the one to own, in my opinion. I think it's the most classical. It's the most tastefully designed, in my opinion. Well, obviously taste is always in the eye of the beholder, but I mean, just look at it. It's the perfect dress watch.
The case is rather reminiscent of the iconic Saab 033. Did this actually inspire the Saab's stepped lugs? Who knows? Another design decision which is unusual is to have the bezel and a coin edge. This was more common in the 1930s, like the Hanhart timing bezels, for example, or the Oris Moonphase I also used to own. However, unlike those watches, we see it in the gold-plated high-polish finish, contrasting the subdued, brushed silver steel sections of the lugs and sides, making this a subtle but effective use of two-tone. And nothing is as indicative of the 1980s as two-tone.
One thing to note about gold plating of this era is that it's a lot more generously applied. We're talking 1 to 2 microns thick compared to the 0.5 we typically see today. And the result is, well, it's a lot more long-lasting. It doesn't wear off. This one looks, I mean, I can't see any of the gold plating worn off at all. So, yeah, and I've experienced this again many times with more vintage gold-plated Seikos. They just don't make them like this anymore, and it's a simple explanation of cutting costs.
The tone of the gold is just right, not too rich and therefore cheap looking, but simultaneously gold enough to differentiate it from the plain steel nicely. The 7F39 was an amazing caliber and highly overlooked, somewhat lost in the many world firsts and astonishing achievements Seiko was consistently unleashing onto the world. It was introduced with this model in 1986 and ran for several decades. It's a wonderfully useful movement that gives us not only the time, moonphase, date and day, but a 24-hour subdial at the 9, which can also be independently adjusted to track a second time zone in 24 hours, making it basically as useful as a GMT.
So just fantastically useful, especially that second time zone. Now, I did a bit of research. There's a website, I forget off the top of my head, but you type in the serial number and it will give you a date of production. Very, very useful if you're hunting for vintage Seikos. So according to that, this was produced in 1989, so quite a late model. Explains its excellent condition. Yeah, definitely hard legs, but yeah, outstanding condition for its age.
In terms of negatives, I do wish it didn't have the ticking seconds to remind you it's quartz. But you got to remember, quartz was cutting edge and something to be proud of back then and not scoffed at like it is today. Hence why it's also printed on the dial. But it's not a big deal. I love the grab and go ease of quartz. It was part of the reason why I settled on my particular Santos. I'm mainly a sports and tool watch kind of guy, so I actually prefer it to be quartz. The aftermarket cheap strap it came on, while it does look the part, feels appallingly low quality, and I will be upgrading it to something more refined and luxurious. The snapback case gives a low water resistance, but being a dress watch, not the end of the world. The biggest downfall, however, has got to be the size. For those with genuinely large wrists, it will seem extremely small. But those like me with more modest wrists, it gives a very period correct fit, which also assists it in looking much more expensive than it actually is.
So there you have it, the Seiko Scrooged watch. That's the official nickname now. And I think this is a definite sweet spot, and to a wider extent, digital watches as well. So Seiko Quartz, definitely worth investigating and looking into, because I mean, this was from a time when Seiko was putting everything on the wrist, and they were the masters of watchmaking. I mean, the undisputed heavyweights. To think this is all proprietary, made at such an accessible price, but so useful and usable, just fantastic stuff. Now, will I keep it? No, I bought this to investigate, to learn, and to make this video. I'm going to actually, I think I'm going to sell it and put the funds towards the next episode. I think that will be a clever way of you know, releasing the funds and then taking that 250 and seeing what else I can find, and then documenting it and sharing it with you guys. If you guys have any tips or recommendations or particular genres, areas, or I don't know, brands you want me to investigate at this price range, do let me know in the comments.
So please like this video if you enjoy these little treasure hunts and finding these lost gems and indisputable bargains. Thank you very, very much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Okay, ciao.